Hello guys, welcome back to this channel, and today we're going to review Black Widow, as it says. One thing before I get started is, I literally watched this movie like a couple days ago, and so I'm going to get my thoughts on it. Second thing, I'm going to change the style of these movies. I'm going to talk about the good, the mixed, and the bad, but I'm not going to like make it categorized. So like what I'm going to do is I'm going to like just say like what I think is good about the movie, and then say what's like not mixed and like what's bad. So it's gonna do two things. One, kind of make these more reviews than just me kind of talking. Second, I think it's gonna give my overall thoughts of the movie a bit better. And then final score is gonna stay the same. So anyway, let's get started. Starting off this review on what this movie's about. This movie is about mostly like tapping into Natasha Romanoff's backstory in her family. A lot of mysteries that we've been really asking for answers, like since I'd say Age of Ultron, I want to say. Even maybe since like the Avengers or Winter Soldier, like how she fight this good. Like this is where we get all our answers to all the questions except one, and I'll talk about that later. Then I have the good, and like starting off the good, a lot of the stuff I loved about this movie, some of the humor, it was a little forced at times, especially with like the what's his name, Alexei guy. But I think that's kind of part of the enjoyment. Some of the humor here really works, especially involving Elena, and it just kind of flows naturally. It fits the characters. At times it's a little weird, especially when you get near the end of the movie, when it gets too much spectacle, which I'll talk about my problems with the final battles, at least the second part of it. The first part is actually quite good, but the second part is really weird. And overall, I think all the stuff involving humor just really work. I think this movie is also pretty like entertaining. It's an interesting movie to watch. I think I should rewatch it, to be honest. I'm gonna rewatch it, and after Shang-Chi comes out, and then I'm gonna rank the movies then, and then the next I'm gonna rank the movies is after either Eternals or Doctor Strange 2. I'll figure that out. So I'm not, and then, so here, like, yep, I'm gonna, what was I gonna say? I think all the characters here really work, specifically, but my problem with that is also, like, Taskmaster was kind of disappointing, and the villain they could have done more with. And also, I think Black Widow gets overshadowed in her own movie, which is kind of interesting. And no pun intended, by the way, because the villain's living in the shadows. Whatever. And so you can kind of see, like, all the characters kind of have a flair to them. I didn't care for Melina as much, but I liked the other two family members. So overall, great character set. I love that part of it. So the action, it's much more brutal than it normally is. Like it's so loud and brutal. None of the MCU action is ever this brutal. It's mostly like when you see a head smacked at the door, you hear, like, it's just brutal. You see a lot, but I think here's my problem with it. They go, instead of like just sticking in the middle, just having like a normal fight scene like in Captain America and Winter Soldier, they make it brutal, but they take out a bunch of reality into it. Because like, especially like you see a car pretty much blow up in part of the movie, and Natasha's still alive, and she's fine. Like, I mean, I bet you could survive that, but I don't think you would be like perfectly fine. That's one of my mixed things I'll talk about later. And I think some other things I really like, just the fight scenes, choreography as a whole, probably some of the best fight scenes we've gotten, especially with Taskmaster. The one in the house is really good. That little car chase through Budapest is really cool. I think the fight scenes are great here. Most of the action sequences are quite good. A bunch of the revelations are pretty good. I'm gonna be honest. I remember I wish they took out the spectacle of it near the end, because those little talk scenes are great. Like, they really work. The whole Red Room thing, it's a mystery that you didn't care about, I've noticed throughout the movie. And that was really nice. And I like how it's a bit more different. Like, I feel like Phase 4 so far, everything except Falcon the Winter Soldier so far, over the 3 things we've gotten, have felt really different. Like, Loki, kind of like a time bureau, time bending sort of travel, whatever. WandaVision sitcom, and then this you kind of have a spy thriller. This one's more of a thriller than I'd say Winter Soldier or Civil War. Civil War are. And I like how it picks up right after Civil War, but it kind of just assumes you know everything about what happened in Civil War and in movies before that. The post-credit scene was kind of weird. I wish Valentina was not in it. And also, I bet this is going to lead in the Hawkeye show, but I don't think Yelena would be stupid enough to not know that Hawkeye's a hero and that Natasha would sacrifice herself. I don't know. It's kind of weird. I bet that's not going to be... That's either going to be a good plot line or it's going to be a horrible plot line that's going to be just ruin some of the Hawkeye show. I don't know. Just my thoughts. That's pretty much all I have to say about the good. I have the mixed stuff. I think a lot of the stuff that I didn't like, I didn't dislike. The one thing I look at, I think they could have done more with the main villain. I don't remember his name. Dreykov, Colonel Dreykov. They could have done a lot more with him. Like, give him a backstory, give him, like, a motivation, because you don't really see that. You just see him just, like, doing stuff with these girls, and, I mean, it kind of worked, but, I mean, no, it did work, but you could have done more with it. You could have added a second layer on top of what they did and what he's doing, which I wish his motivations were he had more of a motivation, like, and a backstory, too. Because, like, you never really get to know. I wish we spent a little bit more time with this character. This also might be why they should have done a couple things. They could have made this 2 movies. One movie mostly about Black Widow and her training, and that could have been taking place before Iron Man 2, and that would have been a cool way to start it off. That could have taken place after, like, if you were to watch it chronologically or however you want to watch it. I'd say Age of Ultron, and then all the stuff and then this could have been like a good second movie to kind of close out the story of Black Widow, and then she appears, and then you can have her get back. Or this would have been the better option. They do make a TV show. Spend a bit more time in the past during that like weird title sequence. That was super weird. You didn't have to montage it so much. You could have just had it like play out a bit more, or just done a few spy missions when they were kids. But the problem is the way they played it out, it was kind of weird. Or this actually would have been the best option. Make a TV show and then come back later for the movie to finish off the story. Or just resolve the story back before Iron Man 2. Although, the only problem is, it kind of would have taken out her care. I mean, it would have been a little weird. Anyway, this should have been before Iron Man 2. Enough about that. Dreykov is a decent enough villain. He's, I'd say, kind of a middle tier villain. I'd say C tier. I like him a lot. He's definitely not bottom tier. He's so much better than like the bottom 5. I have like a big bottom 5. Whiplash, Malekith, Caecilius, Killian, and Yellow Jacket. Those are like my bottom 5. 6 if you include Dormammu. But I wouldn't say he's the main villain of the movie. If I had to just pick main villains, those are like my bottom 5. And then Dreykov is definitely better than those. I think he's better than Hammer, Jan Rog. Oh wait, Yellow Jacket was in the bottom 5. Ronan was then Yellow Jacket, I'd say. Ghost is decent enough. It's like in that tier with Ghost, I'm trying to think, whatever. And he's in the tier with like Ghost, Ironmonger. Red Skull might be a little bit higher. He might be like the highest in the tier. I don't know. But overall, he's an okay villain, and that's kind of the only thing I really have in the mix. That's mixed up this movie. Then we have a lot of the bad stuff in this movie. Mostly it's just expectations and disappointments. Like, specifically with Taskmaster, I believe he's a Spider-Man villain in the comics. Let me know if I'm right in the comments below. I don't read comics. I like to have this one in here somewhere. It's right here. I wonder if Taskmaster is in it. He probably isn't. I'm just looking through it. Okay, no. Anyway, he not a great villain. I think it was Melina. It would have been a little bit better than having just Olga Kurylenko as his daughter. That's just kind of weird. They could have done a bit more with Taskmaster. I like how it's just a henchman with a backstory, but I wish Taskmaster, he wasn't a henchman. He worked alongside Dreykov, and then what they could have done is he's the guy that kind of goes outside. He goes like in the outside a bit more, and then Dreykov works behind the scenes. That would have actually worked pretty well, and I would have actually liked that. But anyway, going back to the movie, but so Taskmaster, kind of a disappointment. A lot of I wish they kind of gave Black Widow a bit more of a character arc, but they didn't really do that. And she gets overshadowed, which nah. The post-credit scene was kind of I like the first part of it, but then like the second half, once Valentina came in, just doesn't work. But overall, then like some of the stuff at the beginning, like the Hope Retail sequence is pretty cool. But then you jump right into like this giant montage of like these people getting assassinated. It's just kind of weird. Like as you just jump into that, I wish that wasn't montaged. But at the same time, it would have stretched out the length of this movie. But I feel like you could have done a little bit less backstory. Well, actually, you should have done more backstory. The problem is this it's trying to squish too much into 2 hours and 10 minutes. And I noticed that a lot of, kind of like some of the other MCU movies, like Age of Ultron and Iron Man 3, it's kind of just like moving from plot point to plot point to plot point quite fast. And you do eventually get some times to breathe when you get to the middle of the movie. But that first half is just plot point after plot point after plot point after plot points. So, like, there's a lot of plot points in this movie. Not as many as, like, Iron Man 2, for example. But there's enough to fill in at least 1.5 movies. And there's enough for 2 movies, I would say. But it would be kind of a stretch. But overall, this movie kind of came too late. The timing is super weird. This movie should have come out after Civil War, but, like, right after it. Maybe another 2016 MCU movie. That part of the MCU is kind of weird because everything just feels like a sequel to Civil War. Black Panther, this kind of, and Spider-Man Homecoming all feel like sequels to Civil War. So it's weird in that way. So, I mean, overall, I do actually enjoy this movie quite a bit. It's enjoyable. But overall, like, a lot of the bad stuff, like, especially with the plotting, kind of weird. Also, you never really get to know what Dreykov's master plan is. I get that. He's kind of controlling these girls and teaching them to be amazing assassins and great fighters. And I mentioned this earlier. One thing that they didn't explain of all the questions, they didn't explain what Hawkeye and there are 2 things they forgot to explain. How Clint and Natasha met. That would have probably been the TV show that I was thinking about. I mentioned earlier, and what exactly happened. They never really mentioned that in this movie. They just mentioned that they hid in that thing for 2 years. That must be boring. 2 days. I thought it said 2 days until I looked it up. Oh wait, no, it was 2 years. I was like, wait, what? That would be so boring. I mean, if they get each other company, maybe that would be fine. But whatever. Anyway, going back to the movie, some closing thoughts. I do enjoy it. It's entertaining. I think in rewatch it's going to be a bit better because I know what happens in the end. I bet it's one of those movies that when you rewatched it, you kind of understand it a bit more. Like, there's a lot of movies that I've seen, especially some Bond movies, where the first time I watch it, I'm like, all right, it's okay. Like, specifically, You Only Live Twice is one I look at. And then once I watch it a second time, it gets a lot better for me. I've noticed that a lot of spy thrillers as well, like Knives Out, for example. First time I watched it, I was like, all right, this is pretty good. And then second time, I loved it. And I bet that's what's going to happen for this movie. The trailers looked amazing, and I was excited for this movie since, like, they announced it. I said I wanted a Black Widow movie for years. Since Endgame, I was like, I wanted a Black Widow movie. I didn't care enough before that. I wasn't really a huge MCU fan until Endgame came out. I mean, I was still an MCU fan, but I wasn't as big of an MCU fan as I am now. So, yeah. That about concludes my thoughts. I still really enjoy it. If you loved it, that's amazing. I'll give it like a 7.6 out of 10. I still really enjoy this movie. I think it's better than a bunch of I think it's like a C or B tier MCU movie. There's a lot of them in probably the B tier. But I still really enjoy it. I really like it. But I don't think it's as good as some of the other ones. So, Adios.